The conference hall on Station Meridian, 7 stank of synthetic air, and something the humans called ambition. I'd been stationed there for 3 cycles now, long enough to recognize the particular brand of arrogance that came with Galactic Council meetings. My name is Vorth, and I serve as a cultural liaison, which is a fancy way of saying I watch species interact and file reports nobody reads. Today's entertainment? A demonstration of reflex capabilities across various species. Thrilling stuff, really. About as exciting as watching fungus grow on a moisture panel. Next up, announced Coordinator Brell, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence like a broken light fixture. We have representatives from Earth. The humans. A collective murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Humans were still new to the Council, barely 50 years since first contact, and most species hadn't figured out what to make of them yet. Too soft, looking to be warriors. Too scattered to be proper administrators. Too emotional to be taken seriously in galactic politics. I watched as 2 humans entered the demonstration arena. The first was a male, tall by their standards, with dark skin and a shaved head that gleamed under the station's artificial lighting. His name tag read Marcus Webb. The second was a female, shorter, with auburn hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. Her tag said, Kira Vance. Oh good, chittered Slicks, a Corthian diplomat sitting 3 seats down from me. More mammals. How delightfully primitive. Several delegates laughed. The Corthians were insectoid, all chitinous plating and compound eyes, and they'd been part of the Council for 8,000 years. In their view, anyone who'd discovered faster-than-light travel after them was basically still playing with sticks and rocks. Coordinator Brell gestured to the testing station, a sleek platform equipped with various reflex measuring devices. The human nervous system, he read from his datapad, clearly bored, operates on a combination of electrical and chemical signals. Response time averages between 200 to 300 milliseconds for visual stimuli. Pathetic, someone muttered from the Draenor section. They were reptilian, cold-blooded, and exactly as warm in personality as their body temperature suggested. Marcus stepped forward first. The testing protocol was simple, used across hundreds of worlds. A light would flash at random intervals, and the subject would press a corresponding button. Basic stuff. Kindergarten-level reflexes. He scored 247 milliseconds average. Respectable. Unremarkable. The kind of number that made you nod politely and forget immediately after. Kira went next. 223 milliseconds. Slightly better. Still nothing to write home about, assuming you had a home and wrote letters, which most species didn't anymore because, technology. Thank you for that. Adequate demonstration, Brell said, his tone making it clear that adequate was generous. Now, if we could move on to the Velthran representatives, who average 140 milliseconds. Actually, Kira said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, we'd like to request an alternative demonstration. Oh, this was new. I sat up straighter, my sensory stalks perking with interest. Humans asking for special treatment? This would either be hilarious or disastrous, possibly both. Brell's eyes blinked in annoyance. 1, 2, 3, 4, like he was counting down his patience. The protocol is standardized across all species. We cannot, simply. We're not asking to change the protocol, Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. We're asking to demonstrate a different aspect of human reflexes, one that your standard tests don't measure. The hall went quiet. You could hear the environmental systems humming, recycling our air for the 800th time that day. And what aspect would that be? Brell asked, clearly ready to shut this down and move on to species who followed the rules. Like proper civilized beings. Kira smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made my secondary stomach clench. Threat response reflexes. Specifically, reactions under genuine danger. Now she had everyone's attention. Even Slick stopped preening his antennae to watch. "Genuine danger?" Brell repeated. "You want us to endanger you? That's against 17 different council safety regulations, not to mention the liability issues, the insurance complications." "No liability," Marcus said, pulling out a datapad and tossing it to Brell, who caught it with two of his manipulator arms. "Full waiver. Signed, sealed, witnessed by Earth's ambassador. We take full responsibility for whatever happens." I leaned forward. This was getting interesting. Humans were either incredibly stupid or incredibly confident, and I'd spent enough time around them to know those two things weren't mutually exclusive. Brell examined the datapad, his eyes scanning the legal text. His mandibles clicked together in thought. "This appears to be in order, but I fail to see how." "Just give us 5 minutes," Kira said. "If we can't demonstrate something worth your time, we'll sit down and shut up. Promise." The coordinator looked around the hall, gauging reactions. Most delegates seemed amused, eager to watch these upstart primates embarrass themselves. A few looked genuinely curious. The Velthrons, who'd been about to showcase their superior reflexes, looked downright annoyed at the delay. "Very well," Brell finally said. 5 minutes. Make it count." Marcus and Kira moved to the center of the arena. They'd brought a case with them, sleek and black, very human in its utilitarian design. Kira opened it and began removing items: a small table, a wooden board, 5 knives. "Oh, brilliant," Slicks chittered. "They're going to throw pointy objects at each other. How barbaric, how utterly human." More laughter. I noticed, though, that several of the military observers from various species weren't laughing. They were watching with the focused intensity of predators sizing up potential prey or competition. Kira set up the wooden board on the table. It had a clear outline of a hand drawn on it. She placed the board in front of her, then held up one of the knives. The blade gleamed under the lights, sharp and purposeful. "This is called the knife game," she announced, her voice carrying across the hall. "It's a human test of nerve and reflexes. Simple rules. You spread your fingers on the board. You stab between them with the knife. You go faster and faster." She demonstrated slowly, tapping the knife point between her fingers. "A simple rhythm. The catch," Marcus added, "is that one mistake means you stab your own hand. Real consequences, real danger, real reflexes." "This is absurd," declared Ambassador Thren, a Velthran with scales the color of old brass. "Any child can stab between stationary fingers. There's no skill in." "She won't be going slow," Marcus said, "and she won't be the one holding the knife." Silence. Beautiful, complete silence. The kind of silence that meant everyone was trying to figure out if they'd heard correctly. Kira placed her hand flat on the board, fingers spread wide. She looked up at Marcus and nodded once. He picked up one of the knives, testing its weight, spinning it once in his palm like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You can't be serious," Brell said, all 4 eyes wide. "If his aim is off by even a centimeter." "Then I lose a finger?" Kira said cheerfully. "Or maybe just get a really interesting scar. That's kind of the point." I watched Marcus's face. It was calm, focused, but there was something else there. Trust. Absolute, complete trust. These two had done this before, or something like it. They knew each other's capabilities, like most species knew their own limb movements. "Whenever you're ready," Kira said softly. Marcus started slow. Tap. The knife point struck the wood between her fingers with precision. Nothing impressive yet. Just establishing rhythm. Then, he got faster. Tap, 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 tap. The blade became a blur of motion, striking in sequence. Thumb to pinky. Pinky to thumb. The pattern repeated, accelerating. Some delegates leaned forward. Others looked away, unable to watch. I couldn't blink, metaphorically speaking, since I don't have eyelids. My species sees through sensory interpretation of electromagnetic radiation, But that's beside the point. The knife moved faster. The tapping became a continuous staccato, like rainfall on metal. Marcus's hand was practically invisible, just a streak of motion and flashing steel. Kira's hand didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't tremble. Impossible, breathed someone behind me. The speed, the precision, under that kind of pressure. Then Marcus threw in variations. He skipped fingers, went backward, changed rhythm unpredictably. Kira's hand remained steady, her expression peaceful, almost meditative. She trusted him completely, and he delivered that trust back with every strike that didn't draw blood. 30 seconds. 45. The sound filled the hall, hypnotic and terrifying in equal measure. I realized I was holding my breath, which was silly, because my species can survive 15 minutes without oxygen, but the moment demanded it. 1 minute. Marcus was sweating now, but his hand never wavered. The knife had to be moving at impossible speeds. The blade should have been heating from air friction. Actually, it probably was. This was insane. This was incredible. This was the most human thing I'd ever witnessed. At 90 seconds, Marcus stabbed the knife into the board between Kira's middle and ring finger, leaving it quivering in the wood. He stepped back, breathing hard. Kira lifted her hand and examined it with theatrical slowness, wiggling all 5 fingers. "Not a scratch," she announced, grinning. Not in laughter this time. In shocked murmurs, heated discussions, and a few species-specific expressions of disbelief that don't translate well. "That proves nothing," Thren shouted over the noise. "It's a parlor trick, rehearsed, meaningless." "You're right," Kira said, pulling the knife from the board. She held it out toward the Velthran. "It is rehearsed, we've practiced, we know each other's timing, so here's a better test." She looked around the hall, making eye contact with dozens of species. "Anyone here want to try it? On me?" Dead silence. Again. I was starting to enjoy these moments. "Anyone?" she repeated. "I'll put my hand down. You stab between my fingers. Fast as you can. Fast as you dare. Let's see if your superior reflexes can match a rehearsed human performance." Nobody moved. Nobody volunteered. The implications were sinking in slowly, like water through sand. These humans had just demonstrated reflexes that required not just speed, but precision under pressure, trust under threat, and the kind of steady nerves that came from genuinely dangerous situations. The tests we'd been running measured reaction time in sterile environments, safe environments. Humans apparently trained their reflexes by risking their actual body parts. "I'll do it," said a voice from the military section. A Krev officer, all muscle and confidence, strode down to the arena. His species had excellent hand-eye coordination, honed through millions of years of evolution as ambush predators. This is child's play. Kira reset the board and placed her hand down. The Krev took the knife, examined it, nodded. He started the pattern. Slow. Controlled. Deliberate. He made it through 3 complete cycles before his hand started shaking. 5 cycles before sweat began forming on his scaled brow. 7 cycles before he stepped back, placing the knife down carefully. "I cannot go faster," he admitted. "The risk of error increases exponentially with speed. To continue would be unwise." "But you didn't hurt me," Kira pointed out. "So you succeeded, right?" "I went half the speed of your partner," the Krev said quietly. "Perhaps less. And my hands were shaking. This requires more than reflexes. It requires—" He paused, searching for the word. "Nerve." A Velthran who managed 6, but looked ready to collapse. A human named Davis from Earth's military contingent who made it to 8 cycles at decent speed before admitting he couldn't match Marcus's performance. "You see," Marcus said, addressing the hall, "your tests measure biological response time. Important, sure, but humans don't train reflexes in a vacuum. We train them under stress, under fear, under conditions where mistakes have consequences. He picked up another knife. We have games, sports, professions that all push our reflexes beyond the baseline. We don't just react fast. We react fast while scared, while tired, while our hearts are pounding and our hands want to shake. We train ourselves to function under pressure that would make most species freeze. Kira stood beside him. It's not that our baseline reflexes are better than yours. They're not. Your species are faster, by the numbers. But when you add in psychological factors, threat assessment, fear management, trust dynamics, humans have been refining those skills since we lived in caves and hunted animals that could kill us. This is still just a trick, Slicks protested, but his voice lacked conviction. One game doesn't prove. You're right, Marcus agreed. It's just one demonstration. But maybe it's worth considering that human reflexes aren't special because of how fast our nerves fire. They're special because of what we can make ourselves do, despite every survival instinct screaming at us to stop. He held up the knife, letting it catch the light. We're persistence hunters, pack animals, social creatures who learn to trust each other with our lives because that's the way we survived. Our reflexes aren't just biological. They're cultural, psychological. We've built our entire civilization on the idea that sometimes you have to put your hand down and trust your partner not to stab you. Kira smiled at that, metaphorically and literally, apparently. A few delegates laughed, but it was different now. Thoughtful, respectful. The dynamics in the room had shifted in some fundamental way. Coordinator Brell cleared his throat, which sounded like grinding metal because of his vocal structure. That was certainly educational. The Council will take this information under advisement regarding human capabilities. We're not done, Kira said. Oh no. Oh yes. Oh, this was getting better. She pulled the remaining knives from the case. 3 more blades, identical to the others. She set them on the table in a row. That was Marcus's skill, she said. Now let me show you mine. She picked up all 4 knives, holding them in her left hand. With her right hand, she reached up and pulled a blindfold from her pocket. Black fabric, completely opaque. You have got to be kidding me, I muttered. Several delegates around me echoed the sentiment in various languages and vocal ranges. Kira tied the blindfold around her eyes, checking it twice to make sure no light got through. Then she placed her right hand on the board, fingers spread. With her left hand, she held the 4 knives. Same game, she announced to the dead silent hall. Same rules. Except now I'm doing it to myself, blind, and I'm going to accelerate until I run out of board space or nerve. She'll mutilate herself. We can't allow. Waivers signed, Marcus reminded him. And trust me, Kira knows what she's doing. You better be right, Kira said, grinning under the blindfold. Otherwise, this is going to hurt a lot. She started the pattern. Slow at first, feeling the rhythm, the space between her fingers. The knife in her left hand moved with careful precision, tapping wood. Then faster. Her hand found the rhythm, the muscle memory taking over. The knife became an extension of her arm, moving with fluid grace. No hesitation, no fear in her posture. The second knife joined the pattern. Now she was alternating, tapping with one blade while the other moved to the next position. The complexity increased exponentially, but her speed didn't decrease. Third knife, fourth knife. She was juggling the blades now, in a sense, keeping track of 4 separate points of metal while her right hand remained perfectly still and her eyes were covered. The speed increased and increased. The sound of steel on wood filled the hall like machine gun fire, rapid and relentless. Kira's breathing stayed steady. Her posture relaxed, despite the obviously insane thing she was doing. I realized something in that moment, watching a human woman stab at her own hand with multiple knives while blind. This wasn't about reflexes at all. This was about control, about mastery over instinct. About training yourself so thoroughly that your body knew what to do, even when your conscious mind couldn't see the danger. 60 seconds. 90. 2 minutes. The knives kept moving, never slowing, never missing. Kira's hand didn't even twitch. At 2 minutes 30 seconds, she stopped, placed all 4 knives on the table with a clatter, pulled off the blindfold, held up her hand, rotating it to show every angle. Perfect. Unmarked. Not even a close call visible on the skin. The hall exploded, in noise. Arguments, discussions, species-specific expressions of shock and awe. I sat there, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. How? Brel finally asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. How is that even possible? Kira shrugged. Practice. Lots and lots of practice. And maybe a little bit of what humans call stubbornness. We don't like being told something's impossible. Makes us want to prove otherwise. Ambassador Thren approached slowly, his reptilian features unreadable. I owe you an apology, both of you. Marcus said without rancor. We're used to it. We look soft. We look slow. We look like we shouldn't have survived our own planetary evolution. But you did survive, I found myself saying, standing up from my seat. All eyes turned to me. Great. You survived because you developed reflexes that account for fear, for trust, for social dynamics. You turned your weaknesses into advantages. You made your limitations into training tools. Kira nodded. Exactly. We're not the fastest. We're not the strongest. But we're really, really good at pushing past what should be possible, at making ourselves do the scary thing anyway. That's the human reflex that matters. Not how fast we react, but that we react at all when we should be running away. The demonstration ended there, but the conversations continued for hours. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive mammals were suddenly very interested in Earth's training methodologies. Military observers wanted to know about human stress response conditioning. Scientists wanted to study the neurological basis for performing under pressure. And me? I filed a report that people actually read for once. A report about how humans measure reflexes not in milliseconds, but in trust. Not in response times, but in courage. Not in biological capability, but in trained impossibility. The knife game became a minor legend on Station Meridian 7. The story of how 2 humans shut up an entire council hall with nothing but steel, wood, and absolutely terrifying amounts of nerve. They'd asked for 5 minutes to prove themselves. They'd taken 7, and changed how we thought about Earth's newest members. Not bad for a species that learned to walk upright only a few million years ago. As the delegates filed out, still arguing about what they'd witnessed, I caught Kira's eye. She winked at me. Stick around, she said. Part 2 of the demonstration happens tomorrow. We're going to show you what human reflexes can do with actual combat applications. My sensory stalks perked up again. Combat applications? Marcus grinned. Trust me. If you thought this was impressive, wait until you see Kira dodge incoming fire. I made a note to clear my schedule. Suddenly, my boring liaison position had become the most interesting job on the station. Human reflexes, I was learning, were only impressive when you understood what they'd been refined to overcome. Fear, doubt, pain, social pressure, and the screaming certainty that you were about to do something incredibly stupid. The fact that they did it anyway? That was the real superpower. Everything else was just biological details. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting indeed. The next morning, I arrived at Training Deck 5 an hour early. I wasn't the only one. Word had spread faster than a hull breach alarm, and half the station's military contingent had shown up to watch whatever madness the humans had planned for Day 2. Training Deck 5 was designed for combat simulations, hardened walls, energy-dampening fields, medical stations on standby, the kind of place where you tested weapons systems and warrior capabilities without accidentally venting atmosphere or starting an interstellar incident. Kira and Marcus were already there, along with 3 other humans I hadn't met. They were setting up equipment that looked equal parts sophisticated and terrifying. "Vorth," Kira called out when she spotted me. "Glad you could make it. Bring your recording equipment?" My superiors actually responded to yesterday's report. "They're calling it fiction." Marcus laughed. "Wait until they see today's footage. They'll call it special effects." The other 3 humans introduced themselves. First was Jackson Park, a wiry man with graying hair and the kind of scars that came from actually using your combat training. Second was Yuki Tanaka, compact and muscular, with eyes that tracked movement like a predator. Third was Omar Hassan, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a grin that suggested he enjoyed dangerous situations more than he probably should. "So," I said, watching them assemble what looked like automated turret systems, "combat applications. Are you going to shoot at each other?" "Essentially, yes," Yuki said, checking the power cell on one of the turrets. "Non-lethal rounds, of course. Gel capsules filled with marker dye. They sting like hell on impact, but they won't kill you." "Probably." "Probably," I repeated. "She's joking," Jackson assured me. "Mostly. We've all been hit dozens of times in training. Worst-case scenario is bruising and wounded pride." More delegates filtered in. The Krev military observers took prime positions along the observation deck. Ambassador Thren arrived with a full security detail, still looking skeptical despite yesterday's demonstration. Even Coordinator Brell showed up, all 4 eyes focused intently on the arena floor. Slicks arrived last, chittering to himself. "Round 2 of the primate circus. I suppose they'll throw rocks at each other next, perhaps bang some sticks together." I ignored him. I'd learned that Slicks's opinion was inversely proportional to his actual understanding of any given situation. Kira stepped to the center of the arena, raising her hands for attention. The crowd quieted surprisingly fast. She'd earned that much respect, at least. Yesterday we demonstrated precision reflexes under psychological pressure. Today we're showing you evasion reflexes under physical threat. Specifically, how human reflex training applies to actual combat scenarios. She gestured to the turrets positioned around the arena. These automated systems will fire gel rounds at random intervals from random positions. The goal is simple. Don't get hit. Sounds impossible, called out a Draenor officer. Random fire patterns from multiple angles? No one has reflexes that fast. "You're right," Marcus said, joining Kira in the center. "No one has reflexes that fast. That's why we don't rely on reflexes alone." He tapped his temple. "Humans developed something called predictive modeling. Our brains are constantly analyzing our environment, calculating threat vectors, anticipating danger before it manifests. We don't just react to attacks, we predict them. Prediction is not reflex," Thren pointed out. "That's cognition, strategy." "It's both," Yuki interjected. "Human reflex responses integrate predictive analysis at a subconscious level. We train until prediction becomes automatic, until our bodies move before our conscious minds register the threat." Omar activated the turret controls from a datapad. "We're going to run 3 scenarios. First, single turret, predictable intervals. Second, 3 turrets, semi-random patterns. Third, full random chaos mode with all 5 turrets active." "Who's going first?" I asked. Kira cracked her knuckles. "Ladies first. Traditional human courtesy." She walked to the center mark, a circular platform about 3 meters in diameter. The turrets swiveled to track her movement. Red targeting lasers painted lines across the floor, converging on her position. "Ready when you are," she called out. Omar initiated the first scenario. A klaxon sounded. The single turret whined as it charged, then fired. The gel round shot across the arena at impressive velocity. Kira twisted sideways, the projectile missing her by centimeters. She didn't look panicked, didn't look scared, just focused. Second shot. She ducked under it, flowing like water. Third shot. She sidestepped, her movement economical and precise. She's reading the turret's charging cycle, observed a Krev officer, anticipating the firing sequence. Exactly, Jackson confirmed. Humans are excellent pattern recognition machines. Give us enough data, and we'll find the rhythm in almost anything. The shots increased in frequency. Kira's movements became a dance, graceful and purposeful. Dodge, weave, duck, roll. Each motion calculated to waste 0 energy while maximizing effectiveness. 30 rounds fired, 0 hits. Kira wasn't even breathing hard. Scenario 2, Omar announced. 3 turrets, variable patterns. This would be significantly harder. I watched the readouts on my data collector. The turrets were programmed to fire at intervals that seemed random but followed complex algorithmic patterns. The kind of chaos that looked unpredictable but had underlying structure. Could human brains really calculate that in real time? The klaxon sounded again. All 3 turrets activated simultaneously. The arena became a crossfire zone, gel rounds streaking from multiple angles. Kira moved. Not frantically, not desperately, with absolute confidence. She read the angles, processed the vectors, positioned herself in the gaps between fire lanes. Her body flowed through the chaos like she'd choreographed the entire sequence. A round came within millimeters of her shoulder. She'd already shifted her weight, letting it pass harmlessly. Another targeted her legs. She jumped, tucking into a roll that brought her to a safer position. A third went for center mass. She twisted, presenting a profile too narrow to hit effectively. It was beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. This wasn't luck. This was skill refined to an art form. Impossible, breathed Slicks. The processing speed required, the spatial awareness, the physical coordination. Welcome to humanity, I muttered back. They do impossible things before breakfast. 60 rounds between 3 turrets, 4 hits on the outer edge of her uniform, technically grazing shots that wouldn't have stopped her in actual combat. Kira stepped off the platform, accepting a water bottle from Jackson. Not bad, Marcus said. Only 4 tags. You're getting slow in your old age. Old age? Kira shot back. I'm 32. That's practically adolescent by galactic standards. It's middle-aged by human standards, Yuki pointed out. Our species burns bright and fast. Marcus stepped onto the platform. My turn. Let's skip to Scenario 3. Full chaos mode. Omar raised an eyebrow. You sure? That's 5 turrets with genuinely randomized firing patterns. No algorithms, no structure. Pure probability chaos. I'm sure. Let's give them a real show. This was either courage or stupidity. With humans, I'd learned those 2 things occupied overlapping territory. All 5 turrets activated. Their targeting lasers created a web of red light that covered the entire platform. There was nowhere safe to stand. Nowhere that wasn't under direct threat. The klaxon sounded. Hell erupted in gel form. Marcus moved like nothing I'd ever seen. His body became liquid, solid, gas, all at once. He didn't dodge individual shots. He flowed through the spaces between them, reading the chaos not as random events, but as gaps in probability. A shot fired from his left. He'd already moved right, but not far enough to enter another firing lane. A shot came from above, angled downward. He dropped into a crouch that put him below the trajectory while keeping his center of gravity mobile. 3 shots converged on his position. He rolled forward, the rounds colliding in the space he'd occupied a fraction of a second earlier. This is impossible, Thren said flatly. The human reaction time measured yesterday doesn't support this level of performance. The mathematical probability of avoiding randomized fire from 5 directions simultaneously is effectively 0, I agreed. Unless you're not actually reacting, Unless you're predicting. But how can you predict random events? Thren demanded. Jackson answered, without taking his eyes off Marcus. You can't predict specific events, but you can predict probability fields. Marcus isn't avoiding individual shots. He's positioning himself in the statistical gaps where shots are least likely to converge. He's living in the space between probabilities. I watched more carefully. Jackson was right. Marcus wasn't moving after shots were fired. He was moving before, positioning himself where the next volley was unlikely to reach. His brain was running calculations faster than conscious thought, processing threat data and environmental variables in real time. This wasn't just reflexes. This was human cognition, operating at a level most species couldn't comprehend. They'd turned survival instinct into mathematical intuition. 2 minutes of continuous fire, 140 rounds from 5 different angles. Marcus took 7 hits, all on extremities, none on vital areas. When the klaxon signaled the end, he stepped off the platform looking tired but satisfied. 7 hits, Kira observed. I had 4. Looks like I win. You had the semi-random pattern, Marcus protested. I had true chaos. Different difficulty levels. Excuses, excuses. Their banter was cut short by slow, deliberate clapping. We all turned to see who was applauding. It was General Krivosh, the highest-ranking Krev officer on the station. He approached the arena floor with measured steps. That was the most impressive combat performance I've witnessed in 40 years of military service, he said, his voice carrying authority that made everyone shut up and listen. I've seen elite warriors from a dozen species. None could have survived that scenario. Thank you, General, Marcus said respectfully. Though I should point out, survival is kind of humanity's specialty. Indeed. Krivosh studied them both with tactical interest. Tell me, how long does it take to train a human to this level? Depends on the human, Yuki said. Some people have natural talent for spatial reasoning and threat assessment. Others need more intensive conditioning. On average, 5 to 7 years of consistent training to reach combat, effective proficiency. 10 to 15 years to reach what you just witnessed. And these reflexes apply across all combat scenarios? Krivosh pressed. Armed combat? Hand-to-hand? Urban warfare? All of the above, Omar confirmed. Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptability. We train our soldiers to function in any environment against any threat. Can't predict what you'll face in combat, so we prepare for everything. Thren spoke up, his skepticism finally cracking. I need to revise my earlier assessment. Human combat capabilities significantly exceed projected parameters. The psychological conditioning alone represents centuries of refined doctrine. Millennia, actually, Jackson corrected. Humans have been fighting each other since we learned to pick up rocks. We've had a lot of practice getting good at not dying, Slicks chittered nervously. This changes threat assessment calculations considerably. If humans can perform at this level routinely, Marcus and I have been training since childhood. Most humans couldn't do this, but most humans could learn to do this, given time and motivation. That's the key difference. She addressed the crowd directly. You're all thinking about military applications, about threat levels, about whether humanity represents danger to your species. Wrong questions. Marcus picked up her thought. The right question is whether humans make better allies or enemies. Because I promise you, we remember who helped us when we were new to the galaxy, and we remember who laughed at us. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. It wasn't a threat, exactly. More like a statement of fact delivered with perfect calm. The kind of calm that made it more frightening than any aggressive posturing. However, Kira continued, her tone lightening, we're not done with the demonstration. The scenarios so far have been solo performances. Time to show you how. Humans operate as a unit. The 5 humans moved to the platform together, taking positions that formed a loose circle facing outward. Omar activated all the turrets and pulled up a new program on his datapad. This scenario is called swarm defense, he explained. All 5 turrets fire continuously at maximum rate. Random targeting across all 5 humans. The goal is 0 hits on anyone. Time limit, 3 minutes. That's suicide, a Draenor officer protested. 5 targets means the turrets can focus fire. Overwhelming odds. Yeah, Yuki agreed cheerfully. That's why we work together. The klaxon sounded. The arena became a war zone. But something changed. The 5 humans moved in perfect synchronization. Not like individuals, but like parts of a single organism. When a shot targeted Jackson, Marcus was already moving to create a visual barrier that disrupted the targeting laser. When rounds converged on Yuki, Omar and Kira shifted positions to create interference patterns in the firing solutions. They were reading each other's movements, anticipating not just the turrets but their teammates, calling out positions without words, just subtle shifts in posture and stance, creating a defensive dance so complex that the automated systems couldn't find clean shots. Pack tactics, I whispered. They're using pack tactics. General Krivosh nodded slowly. Coordinated defense at a level that requires absolute trust and perfect communication. They're not 5 individuals. They're one organism with 5 bodies. The turrets adapted, changing firing patterns to break the coordination. But the humans adapted faster. They rotated positions, changed formation density, created moving pockets of safety that shifted faster than the targeting systems could track. I checked my chronometer. 2 minutes elapsed. The gel rounds had created clouds of colored mist where they'd impacted walls and floor, but not a single hit on any human. Not one. At 2 minutes 30 seconds, something unexpected happened. One turret malfunctioned, firing 3 rounds in rapid succession at Kira from point-blank range. There was no time to dodge, no way to evade. Marcus dove. He intercepted all 3 rounds with his back, taking hits that would leave serious bruises. Kira didn't even break stride, already moving to cover his position while he recovered. Contact sacrifice, Krivosh said quietly. One member deliberately takes damage to protect another. Ultimate expression of unit cohesion. The 3 minutes elapsed. The klaxon sounded. The turrets powered down. All 5 humans stood on the platform, breathing hard, covered in sweat and marker dye. Marcus had taken 3 hits. The other 4 had 0. The observation deck erupted in discussion. Military observers were frantically taking notes. Scientists were arguing about the neurological basis for such tight coordination. Even Slicks looked impressed, though he'd never admit it out loud. I floated down to the arena floor, my data collector working overtime to record everything. That was remarkable. The coordination, the trust, the willingness to take injury for a teammate. That's humanity in a nutshell, Jackson said, accepting a towel from a medical tech. We're weak, individually. Average reflexes, average strength, average everything by galactic standards. But together, we're unstoppable. Yuki nodded. Evolution made us pack hunters, social creatures, who survived by cooperation. Our reflexes evolved to account for group dynamics, not just individual survival. That's our edge. General Krivosh approached with his full honor guard. I would like to formally request human military advisors for Krev combat training programs. What you've demonstrated today represents tactical capabilities we need to integrate into our own doctrine. We'd be happy to discuss that, Marcus said diplomatically, though I should warn you, human training methods are intense, physically and psychologically demanding. Your soldiers might hate us by the end. Soldiers who don't hate their trainers aren't being trained hard enough, Krivosh replied, with what might have been a smile. Hard to tell with reptilian facial structures. Ambassador Thren stepped forward. The Velthran Confederacy would also like to open dialogue regarding training exchanges. We have clearly underestimated human capabilities. More offers came. The Draenor wanted to study human neurological adaptation. The Korthians wanted to examine the sociological basis for pack coordination. Even species I'd never heard of were suddenly very interested in humanity. Coordinator Brell approached last, looking somewhat embarrassed. I owe you an apology. Yesterday I treated your demonstration as a curiosity. Today I understand it was a warning. Not a warning, Kira corrected. An introduction. This is what humans are. What we've always been. Survivors who turn weakness into strength, fear into courage, and individual limitation into collective capability. She looked around at the assembled delegates. You all have advantages over us. Better reflexes, stronger bodies, more advanced technology in some cases. But humans have spent our entire history learning to overcome advantages. It's literally what we do best. Marcus cleaned marker dye off his arm. We didn't come to the council to prove we're superior. We came to prove we're worth your time. That we bring something valuable to the galactic community beyond raw resources or strategic position. And what's that? Thren asked. Adaptability, Omar said. Humans can learn anything, survive anything, overcome anything, given enough time and motivation. We're not the best at any one thing, but we're good enough at everything to matter. Jackson gestured to the turret-scarred arena. This demonstration wasn't about showing off. It was about showing you who we are at our core. Creatures who face impossible odds and find ways to win anyway. Who trust each other completely when everything's on the line. Who've refined the art of survival into something approaching mastery. The crowd had gone quiet again. That seemed to happen a lot around humans. They had a gift for making you shut up and think. There's one more thing you should know, Yuki said softly. Everything you saw today, the reflexes, the coordination, the trust, that's not military specialists. That's not elite operators. Marcus is a cargo pilot. Kira's a diplomat. I teach self-defense classes on Earth. Omar's a construction foreman. Jackson was a police officer before he retired. She let that sink in. This isn't humanity's best. This is humanity's normal. We all train like this. We all push ourselves like this. It's cultural. It's in our bones. Every human child learns to overcome fear, to function under pressure, to trust their team absolutely, because that's how we survived long enough to reach the stars. They were recalculating everything they thought they knew about Earth's newest members. The question isn't whether humans can fight, General Kravash said finally. The question is whether we're smart enough to make sure humans are fighting with us instead of against us. Several delegates nodded agreement. The political implications were obvious. Humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that shifted power dynamics across the Council, not through threats or aggression, but through simple competence displayed at the highest level. Coordinator Brell cleared his throat with that grinding metal sound. I believe this demonstration has provided sufficient data for revised capability assessments. The Council will reconvene to discuss human integration protocols. One last thing, Kira said, stopping the crowd before they could disperse. We showed you our reflexes in controlled environments, but human reflexes aren't really about controlled environments. They're about chaos, about functioning when everything's falling apart. She smiled that dangerous smile again. So, if you really want to understand human capabilities, stop testing us in labs and arenas. Put us in situations where everything's going wrong simultaneously, where the plans failed, and the backup plans failed, and you're down to improvisation and stubbornness. That's where humans shine brightest. That sounds like a terrible idea, Slicks muttered. Terrible ideas are kind of our specialty. The demonstration ended there, but the conversations continued for days. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Defense treaties were proposed. Research partnerships formed around human neurological and social adaptations. And me? I filed another report. This one about how humans measure combat effectiveness not in firepower or armor, but in trust and adaptation. How they'd turned social bonding into tactical advantage. How they'd refined survival instinct into something that looked like supernatural ability. The knife game had impressed people. The combat demonstration had scared them. But what really changed minds was the realization that humans did all of this casually, as a normal part of their culture. That every human carried these capabilities, refined through lifetime training and cultural expectation. We'd laughed at human reflexes because their baseline response times were average. We'd missed the point entirely. Human reflexes weren't about speed. They were about functioning effectively under conditions that would paralyze most species. About trusting your team when logic said you should run. About facing impossible odds with nothing but skill and stubbornness. 3 months later, human military advisors were training soldiers on 7 different worlds. Human emergency response protocols were being studied by disaster relief organizations across the council. Human team-building exercises were becoming standard in corporate training programs. And somewhere on Earth, children were still playing the knife game, still training reflexes that exceeded what biology alone could provide, still learning that impossible was just a challenge waiting to be overcome. I ran into Kira one last time before she rotated off station. She was heading back to Earth to train the next generation of diplomats. "You changed everything," I told her. "The Council will never underestimate humanity again," she laughed. "We didn't change anything. We just showed them what was always there. Humans being human. Doing impossible things because nobody told us they couldn't be done." "The knife game, though," I said. "That was inspired. Terrifying, but inspired." "That?" Kira grinned. "That's nothing. Wait until they see what we can do with juggling chainsaws." I couldn't tell if she was joking. With humans, you could never really tell. And that, more than anything, was what made them dangerous. Not their reflexes or their training or their coordination. Their absolute refusal to accept limitations that everyone else considered immutable. They'd laughed at human reflexes. Then, the knife stopped between her fingers. Then the gel rounds missed their marks. Then the galaxy realized that humans didn't survive by being the best at any one thing. They survived by being impossible to stop once they decided something mattered. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's deciding that everything matters. Their friends, their teams, their species, their future. They approach life with the same intensity they brought to that arena. Full commitment, zero hesitation, absolute trust in themselves and each other. The galaxy wasn't ready for humanity, but then again, the galaxy's never been ready for anything that actually changed it. Humans just did it anyway, because that's what they do. That's what they've always done. That's what makes them human. And now, the rest of us had to figure out how to keep up.